Hello, my dear viewer, and this is another story about adultery. A spoiled wife from a rich family with a strict father, and now the husband is confronted with his wife's strange behavior. It's unacceptable to him. Let's listen and find out the details, and while you listen to this story, my friend, don't forget to put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. And so, let's go. Since childhood, I have dreamed of a family. I imagined a loving and supportive wife, wonderful children, and a happy life. But just when I thought my dreams were about to come true, everything collapsed. My wife suddenly decided that she needed a little more time before starting a family. Jim Deshaies, baseball analyst for the Chicago Cubs, never ceases to amuse me. One Saturday afternoon, I was watching my favorite Cubs play against the Cincinnati Reds on Marquee Sports, when Deshaies was distracted from the game at the historic Wrigley Field Stadium. Known for his impressive career with the Houston Astros, Deshaies couldn't help but admire the cute kid in the stands, and this moment became a kind of calling card for him. I, like many others, am looking forward to the moment when Deshaies notices a young fan in the crowd. The excitement increased when the Cubs won 7-2 in the fifth inning, and the Reds changed pitching. At that moment, my wife, whom I have been married to for 6 years, entered the room with a beer for me and a glass of wine for herself. I couldn't help but turn my attention from the game to my wife. "I'm sorry, dear, but seeing my wife in tight short denim shorts and a tight top was much more interesting for me." "Enjoying your childhood time, huh?" my wife teased me, looking at the big screen. "Yes, but nothing beats quality time spent with my wife," I replied, making her blush as she settled down next to me on the couch. I couldn't help but admire her as she sat there. "You guys are just so predictable," she giggled, puffing out her chest slightly and shrugging her shoulders. We sat in silence, watching the Cubs score 2 more goals, until Vivian decided it was time to chat during the commercial break. Vivian was happy to offer to go to Chicago next weekend to start the time of preparation for the birth of a child with fun. She advised me to go to the Cubs game while she was shopping or something. I caught Vivian's hint of, or something like that, and gave her a sidelong glance. I innocently joked by asking if she wanted to go to the game with me because I was contagious or something. I felt her body pressed against mine. I was thinking maybe we could both take some time to ourselves this weekend before getting involved in all the wedding celebrations and officially becoming a family, she suggested, giving me her captivating smile and shining blue eyes. She knew that it was difficult for me to refuse her, especially when she uses that charming smile. It's a tactic she's been using on me for the last 8 years, ever since we got married. But at that moment, something about her offer didn't seem right to me. I didn't fully accept her idea, but I didn't reject it either. "Of course, we can come up with something. Let's go to Chicago," I said without much enthusiasm. "We can both take a day off on Friday and go there on Thursday evening." Vivian seemed delighted with the plan. "I'll arrange everything. Trust me," she said impatiently. The thought of our trip didn't leave my mind until late Friday night in our hotel room when I turned on the TV to watch ESPN. By that time, we had already had lunch at a local diner and visited the Shed Aquarium. I asked Vivian, thinking about my evening attire. There was silence before she answered, and I noticed a shiver run through her body. "Well, for you, today is the Cubs game against the St. Louis Cardinals. You'll be sitting right behind the Cubs dugout at third base, where you can enjoy food and drinks," she explained. "As for me, I plan to have dinner, then drink and dance. I will be at one of the high-class clubs in the city. I do not know the date of my return, and it is unlikely that I will be free on Saturday. When we get home on Sunday evening, we can have an intimate night without pills and start our journey towards starting a family." "Wait, are you serious? I can't let you go to Chicago alone for 2 nights and 1 day. What about our relationship? What about the promises we made to each other?" I exclaimed. Vivian looked at me as if I needed to explain everything slowly, which was probably true. "We always talked about having children as soon as we turned 30, even before the wedding, remember Q? But I came to the conclusion that since most of the work will be on me, I deserve this, a small reward for it. A reward? Are you serious? I don't recall the reward clause in our wedding vows. I grimaced in displeasure. You may not be experiencing the physical changes and sacrifices associated with carrying a child for 9 months or postponing your career for the sake of raising a child. But I am the one who works hard to support our family, and I miss such important moments as the first word of the child. Shouldn't that mean something? I asked, my tone bordering on pleading. She dismissed my concerns as unimportant. We've been together for 8 years, Q. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt my love or loyalty? No. I want something for myself. A bonus, a weekend romance. Not love, but just a desire for a day and a half. After that, we can forget about the birth control pills and it will be just you and me forever. But all I hear is me, I snap. They say there is no me in the team, but there is no me in us either. If you do that, we won't be here anymore. Are you saying that you and I will stay together forever if I agree to this? What happens if we decide to have another child? Will the situation be the same? In any case, it won't happen soon. Do you see the scar from the surgery on my forehead? I didn't ask for your consent, Q. I don't need it, she stressed. I just told you about our plans. I'm quite capable of making decisions about my body. It won't change our relationship if you drop your ego. It's not about my ego, baby. Before I think about my ego, I need to deal with your extreme selfishness, I snapped. Maybe I should find the same kind of entertainment as yours. Her expression changed. The superiority she had shown a few minutes ago disappeared, and she began to look insecure. She quickly sent me a ticket to the Cubs game that night. You take the car, and I'll take an Uber to get to my destination, she said, seeming to realize that I'm not the kind of guy she assumed. Disappointed, I shook my head and grabbing my keys and phone left the room without looking back. I could almost hear her suggesting that I go to baseball as a loyal but soon devoted partner. But instead of watching the Cubs game live, I decided to listen to the radio while driving home. Pat Hughes and the rest of the team did a great job, and the Cubs won another victory. I didn't have a specific plan, except that I needed to be with Vivian. It's a shame when your idea of a person is radically at odds with the truth. Vivian Langsor was working as an operator at my bank when I came there to get my first salary at the National Transportation Company, where I recently started working. She worked at the bank for only a few weeks, having recently graduated as a financier. While I was standing in line, I noticed a petite blonde with green eyes and what seemed to be a full bust under a stylish blouse. She chatted casually with customers and quickly processed their transactions until it was my turn at her booth. Your employer can arrange a direct transfer of your salary so that you don't have to queue every Friday, she said with a wide grin. I already knew about this possibility because the salary director told me about it when applying for a job. But personally, I prefer the traditional way of getting a salary on hand. As a child, I spent summers working for my father, and at that time, electronic transactions were unavailable. That's why I'm used to cashing checks in person. It's convenient for me to stick to the traditional method because it also gives me an excuse to visit you. In response, her cheeks flushed with a charming blush, and her smile shone with warmth. While she was anxiously biting her lower lip, I couldn't help but notice a spark of mutual attraction between us. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to always stand in line at Vivian's cashier's window, even if it took a little longer to do so. Despite the attempts of another cashier to lure me to her place, I politely refused and went to Vivian, who kindly accepted my choice. Although I pride myself on my calmness and rationality, I must admit that I feel at ease and confident in the presence of women. A week later, I plucked up the courage and finally asked Vivian to go on a date with me, to which she agreed. I soon discovered that Vivian is not only sociable and intelligent, but also comes from a wealthy family that continues to provide for her in a certain way. After meeting her parents, I learned that her father, a well-known lawyer in our city, is strongly attached to his only daughter. It became clear that Vivian was used to getting her way thanks to her father's wealth and connections. As Vivian and I moved up the career ladder at Bishop Enterprises, we found satisfaction in our achievements, much to the delight of her parents. John Langsor, Vivian's father, emphasized the importance of maintaining the lifestyle Vivian was used to. He made it clear that treating his daughter with respect and fulfilling my responsibilities towards her would allow me to take my rightful place in their family. But he warned that mistreating her or harming her would be unacceptable. "Be careful. If you cross my path, you'll have an enemy for life," John warned me. My name is Quincy, but most people, including Vivian, call me Q. There is a tradition in our family that the firstborn in 4 generations is called Quincy. Since my uncle died, my parents call me Q. Vivian's parents are the only ones who do not adhere to this tradition. All the members of the Langsor family, except John and Barbara, know me as Q. A year and a half after our first date, Vivian and I had a beautiful wedding, which surprised not only me but also my parents. The ceremony was conducted by a state judge, and among our guests was a United States Senator, whom Vivian affectionately calls Uncle Isherm. Before tying the knot, Vivian and I decided to wait until we were 30 before starting a family. In order to move up the career ladder and improve our financial situation, we decided to go to Chicago for the weekend shortly after her 30th birthday. In a hurry, shortly before midnight, I packed 2 suitcases and put the most valuable things in the trunk of the car. I called my younger brother Bill, who agreed to keep me at his place an hour away while I sorted things out. Both he and his wife promised to keep my whereabouts a secret, even if it meant that I would hide it from my wife. As my 30th birthday approached, I was preparing for a weekend trip to Chicago, wanting to relax and reflect on my career and finances. 2 weeks before the trip, I packed my things in 2 suitcases and loaded them into the trunk of my car at midnight. I contacted my younger brother Bill, who agreed to let me stay with him an hour away from home while I sort out my life. Not knowing Vivian, who was most likely busy with her lover, I knew that she would be sympathetic to my departure when we had to return home on Sunday morning. This thought haunted me that evening. I wondered what made Vivian seek solace elsewhere, and why I allowed it. I wondered if I looked weak or submissive in her eyes, trying to satisfy her desires. She will soon realize how wrong she was. Saturday morning was spent on the usual financial chores that might seem trivial, canceling our shared credit cards and transferring half of the money to a new account in my name. It was unclear whether Vivian returned to our room on Saturday and found that I was missing, or whether she was not at home from Friday evening until Sunday morning. Anyway, the first message I received from her was at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. "Where are you? We have to leave at 11, she wrote. I showed the message to my brother, and we laughed while enjoying a margarita on his back porch. He got up to check how the sausages were frying for our brunch. Meanwhile, my wonderful daughter-in-law was in the kitchen making homemade potato salad. In difficult times, family comfort is really incomparable. Half an hour later, another message came with a similar reminder. After a rapid succession of increasingly desperate voicemails, her message at 10 o'clock became a reminder that there was no way she could get home, despite the fact that I drove us there. The next voicemail was filled with anger and threats, followed by a plea for help as she tried to extend her stay at the hotel, but could not do so due to her credit cards being canceled. This margarita was really amazing. My sister-in-law Sharon asked if there was any way to make peace with this stupid woman. She noted the strength of our marriage and my deep concern for her. I was ready to do anything for her, but the way she behaved in this situation made it clear that I was not the main priority in her life. Around 5 o'clock, my brother's phone rang while the 3 of us were still sitting on the back porch, having drunk several glasses of margaritas. He glanced at the caller ID and raised his eyebrows, silently inviting me to answer if I wanted to. I shook my head, indicating that I wasn't interested in the answer. Instead, he handed the phone to Sharon, who was noticeably more sober than my brother and I. "Hi, Viv," she began. I'm answering Bill's calls because he's a little drunk to do it on his own. Yes, we are aware of what happened. We have no information about his current whereabouts, Sharon said. She then questioned Vivian's actions, expressing disbelief at how she could betray such a kind person. Vivian's response left much to be desired. Sharon rolled her eyes and made a face while talking to her on the phone. Sharon replied with a couple of vague confessions, after which she wished Vivian good luck and hung up the phone. Turning to me, Sharon insisted, I gave you a head start. You owe me a favor. Did you even realize that you had a disagreement with her, and then you left without giving her a chance to explain everything? You're really insensitive, you know? You're not buying this, I began. No, I don't believe that, Q. I'm just telling you what she said, and what she's probably telling others trying to find you, Sharon replied. Damn, I muttered. Can someone pour me another margarita? Bill gladly agreed, once again showing why I consider him a great brother. I've already drunk 8 margaritas. There was no chance that I would be able to become a Mensa member in the near future. Despite being hungover on Monday morning, I managed to get to work on time, even though I wasn't dressed appropriately. Upon entering the boss's office, I quickly informed him of my decision to either quit or immediately move to another office. I told him everything, even mentioned my vague idea of temporarily disappearing. I hope this will give me the opportunity to take a break from my wife, or rather from my domineering father-in-law, who may spend some time looking for me, if at all. In addition to requesting a transfer, I also asked the boss to officially change my name to Oliver, my middle name, and to keep any information about me secret within the law. After the boss agreed on my next job, I went to the office in Santa Fe, New Mexico, half an hour later. Oliver Navarro was starting a new life, leaving behind old ties with Indiana and Bishop Enterprises. A week later, I started my duties in a 2-room apartment provided by the company for my new single life. So that my wife could not track my calls and bills, I decided to buy a new phone and change the provider. I shared the new number with only a few trusted people at home, not counting my parents. My brother informed me that my mother disapproves of my actions and seems to support Vivian. I didn't want to face her judgment and risk her giving my number to Viv. Unfortunately, my father unwittingly found himself in the middle of this conflict. I knew that if I gave him my contact details, Mom would most likely convince him to share them, which would cause potential tension between us. That's why I decided not to involve him in this case. Fortunately, Bill and Sharon were reliable confidants, and I was sure that Mom would not be able to get my number from them, despite her persistent attempts. Vivian also tried to make contact, but according to Bill, it took her a week to realize that I was out of town. How can we build a relationship if we can't talk? If we can't solve problems? She asked Bill. Maybe he doesn't want to fix the situation, Viv. You really upset him in Chicago, Bill recalled his response to her. It's only been a couple of nights, Bill. It didn't matter, she defended herself. Maybe not for you, but for him it was everything, Bill replied. Over the next year, my career in Santa Fe continued to develop. I didn't really strive for it, but my social life was practically non-existent, and I was quite happy with it. From time to time, I asked Bill to clarify if I was legally married. To my surprise, Viv did not start the divorce process. I wondered why this happened. From time to time, I met with colleagues after work, but it wasn't until I lived in Santa Fe for about a year and a half that I finally went on a first date. Bob Seger described her as a stunning woman with dark hair and mesmerizing eyes that radiated a certain attractiveness. She was of mixed ancestry, part Pueblo and part Hispanic, and her powerful legs were especially impressive, especially when we found ourselves in bed together. We crossed paths several times, but soon I realized that she was looking for a permanent relationship, and I couldn't offer it to her. 2 months later, I met Evangeline, known as the Born Angel, in my favorite cozy pub. Sitting at the bar, the woman exuded classic Irish charm with dark red hair, freckles, and bright blue eyes. It soon became clear that she also has a well-known Irish temper. I was still in my jacket and tie, tired from a busy day at work, and sipping from a shot glass of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey. Suddenly, a woman's voice rang out, asserting, "The one in the bar is mine, girls. You will find everything to your liking here," as a group of women entered. Observing their clothes, I came to the conclusion that they had recently finished a shift at a nearby factory. They were all dressed in jeans and work shirts. The woman walking towards me had her shirt partially unbuttoned, showing off her revealing cleavage. I couldn't help but notice her gait and bouncing breasts. "What do you have for dinner tonight, Mr. Fancy Dresser?" she asked with a wide smile, her eyes sparkling. "Tennessee, dear. Do you like it?" I replied. Angel and I spent a wonderful evening chatting, dancing, and enjoying drinks. She shared that she rarely goes out, thanks to the nanny who looks after her 2-year-old child. With some embarrassment, she admitted that she did not know who the father of the child was. Unfortunately, I drank too much alcohol and was left alone, suspecting that I was drugged by 2 men with whom I was spending time at a party. This night has taught me some important lessons. My friends and I always make sure that we never leave the bar with a man unless we came with him. We all leave either together or at least in pairs, she said. But my daughter is a real blessing. She is the most important thing in my life. She took out her phone, tapped it a few times, and showed me a picture of a cute baby. "Do you have children?" she asked. "I don't see parenthood in my future," I replied. Starting the story about my trip to Santa Fe, I talked about the difficult situation I found myself in. After listening to my story, the girl asked if I was still married to the woman in question and strongly advised me to deal with this issue. I admitted that I knew this was how it should be, but at that moment, I was more focused on leaving as soon as possible. In addition, there was the problem of communicating effectively with her. Angel and I started with a few one-on-one walks, and then gradually introduced her daughter Eleanor to our adventures. Eleanor hesitated at first, but eventually warmed to me when I knelt down and began to actively communicate with her. I've already read about this approach, and whoever suggested it was truly brilliant. Angel quickly recognized me as her favorite, as Eleanor often sat me on the floor while Angel and I cuddled on the couch. Eleanor crawled into my lap like a puppy and fell asleep, which not only impressed Angel, but also brought me joy. Despite our deep understanding, the topic of exclusivity never arose between Angel and me. From the very beginning of our relationship, she openly said that she sometimes dated someone else. I knew that Angel and I didn't have any serious obligations, so I didn't mind her maintaining another relationship. But as they say, assumptions can be deceptive. I assumed that Bobby, the man in Angel's life, was a man. We never talked about Bobby, just as I assumed she didn't talk to him about me. But after about 3 months of our relationship, she accidentally started talking about how she had gone shopping with Bobby in a bikini a few days before. And then my assumptions turned out to be wrong. I interrupted her, surprised. "Is Bobby a woman? It is spelled Bobby, not Bobby like Robert?" Angel confirmed. "Yes, that's right. Didn't I say that before? Bobby is a lesbian and I'm bisexual." I paused, trying to remember if we'd talked about this before. Angel asked, "Are you sure we haven't discussed this?" She avoided eye contact and clutched her hands convulsively, and I silently shook my head, feeling caught off guard. "Is this a problem for you, Oliver?" she whispered softly. "I've never thought about it before. Although I have known bisexuals, I have never met them. It took me a while to realize that the gender of the partner in her other relationship doesn't change anything in our dynamic. Do you think I should worry if she's really attractive?" I asked, admitting that I usually find women visually more attractive than men. If a woman is exceptionally beautiful, I sometimes feel insecure compared to her. "She's wonderful," she said in response. But my friend assured me that there was no need to worry. "You both have unique qualities," she said with a laugh. And then, as if casually, she added, "By the way, did I ever mention that I'm bisexual? I usually mention this at the beginning of a date to avoid misunderstandings or resentments. Does this mean that you will be interested to know what we do when we are together? Are you that curious?" she asked playfully. No, I never wanted to invade your privacy when I thought Bobby was a man. And the same thing is happening now that I know she's a woman. We are not in a serious relationship, and your personal life is yours, as well as mine. So she's attractive, right? I pretended to be serious, but she saw right through me. Who do you think Eleanor likes best? I asked in a joking manner. Of course you are, she replied with a smile. As a result, I became Eleanor's second assistant, getting permission to pick her up when Angel was late at work. I even installed a child car seat in my Mustang to ensure safety during our trips. When Bobby Clarkson's name popped up on my phone a few months later, I didn't immediately pick up the connection. Angel didn't tell me Bobby's last name, so when she called me, I realized something was wrong. When I picked up the phone, a feeling of anxiety settled in my stomach. Bobby was beside herself with excitement and broke the terrible news that Angel had been in a fatal car accident on her way home from work. Authorities contacted Bobby after they found Angel's phone, where she was mentioned several times in the call history. Bobby rushed to the hospital and found out that Angel had passed away. Overcome with grief, Bobby remembered that Eleanor needed to be picked up from the babysitter, and Angel allowed it to be done. We agreed to meet at Angel's apartment after I pick up Eleanor. Arriving at the apartment with a confused child, I found Bobby sitting in the kitchen and crying uncontrollably. She was hugging Eleanor tightly, and tears were streaming down her face. We hugged tightly for what seemed like an eternity, two adults and a confused toddler clinging to each other. After a while, we reluctantly let go of each other, realizing that we had to focus on the child's well-being and determine our next steps. Putting together the scraps of information about Angel's life, we realized that she was an orphan who had no living relatives. We had to take care of Eleanor until the appropriate authorities could be found to take care of her. Bobby and I bought some cans of tuna for sandwiches, and I found a pack of juice and chips to feed Eleanor. As we mourned our dead friend, we discussed what to do with Eleanor next. It dawned on us that, according to the law, she belongs to the state and, most likely, will be transferred to a foster family, and this thought weighed on both of us. Despite the uncertainty, we decided that keeping Eleanor with us was the best choice for her, even if it wasn't the most logical decision. We decided that Eleanor would stay with us for the time being and would not be placed in foster care. As long as the state does not know about her, it will not interfere and send her away. We were determined to make sure that Eleanor would not go unnoticed. Bobby questioned my ability to raise a child, to which I admitted that I didn't know much, but I was once a child myself. Despite my lack of experience, I was ready to take care of Eleanor. This is not exactly the comfort I was looking for, I said. Over the next hour, we discussed various options and worked out an action plan for Eleanor. As a result, we decided that I would give up my apartment, move in with Angel and become the main caregiver of the child, and kindergarten would be additional support. Bobby agreed to help me regularly, even though none of us had any experience with children. Do you know the old saying? She asked with a smirk. The blonde leads the blind. Her joke finally broke the tension in the room, and I giggled. Actually, it's the blind leads the blind, I corrected her with a smile. But your version is definitely funnier. By the way, I'm Oliver Navarro. It's nice to officially meet you, Bobby, I said, holding out my hand for a handshake. She glanced briefly at my hand, and then stepped forward to greet me without shaking hands. I hugged her sorrowfully, already feeling the weight of her absence. God, I'm going to miss her so much, she whispered. Me too, was all I could say. The next morning, I called my boss and asked for a few personal days to deal with Angel's passing. Bobby and I decided to cremate Angel's body. It took Eleanor, Bobby, and I a while to get used to the new daily routine. Bobby came to the apartment almost every evening after work. We both took turns cooking, and it was clear why Eleanor liked her so much. She was smart, funny, and energetic, just like Angel. Angel was tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and had curves in all the right places. I loved spending time with her, and I missed her on the evenings when she didn't come. Bobby and I often talked about our feelings for Angel until late at night. 3 months later, Bobby finally plucked up the courage to talk to me one evening after putting Eleanor to bed. I was sitting on one end of the couch in the living room, and Bobby was standing next to me, casually crossing her legs, a move that most women do effortlessly, but many men find difficult. "Yes," I replied, stretching the word, feeling a sense of anticipation. "Oliver, how would you like us to move into a bigger apartment and I could move in with you permanently?" Bobby suggested. "It would be more profitable for us to cooperate and take care of Eleanor together. I am very attached to the child and strive to become a mother to her. You could also play the role of a father. I know that she is very dear to you too. We don't have to be married to raise a child. In fact, if we were both present in the family, it would allow us to lead our own social life. Since we are friends and not romantic partners, there should be less chance that we will break up, as happened with my wife." Despite Bobby's undeniable beauty, I didn't even think to take a step towards her because of her interest in women, which I respected. But I couldn't deny the strong feelings I had for her. Our mutual love for Eleanor brought us closer, and as a result, our friendship became even stronger. Our bond was based on a shared devotion to Eleanor, and the lack of romantic or intimate tension between us only strengthened our friendship. The three of us became like a close-knit family, especially when Eleanor started calling us mom and dad, a habit she picked up from other children in kindergarten. It's amazing how just two simple words can have such a profound effect on us adults. When Eleanor first called me dad, my heart was filled with happiness, and when she called Bobby mom, it seemed to touch Bobby deeply. When I was helping Eleanor tie her shoelaces, she looked up at me and said, "Thanks, Dad." I felt a lump form in my throat and tears welled up in my eyes. I quickly retreated to the bathroom to clean myself up. A few minutes later, I came out with tears in my eyes, but with a smile on my face. She playfully patted my hand, and I couldn't help but smile and nod. Despite the fact that Bobby and I never showed the typical affection of husband and wife, in the following years we easily joined the company of Eleanor's parents, classmates, and acquaintances at social events. When asked, we admitted that we were not married and avoided talking about children. I was completely shocked when Vivian, yes, the same Vivian, showed up at our place on Saturday morning, 4 years after I broke off my relationship with her. "Oliver, someone's here for you," Bobby called from the living room while I was sitting at the kitchen table playing dice with Eleanor. Eleanor followed me into the living room, and I couldn't tell who was more surprised, me or Vivian. Is she yours, Q?" my wife asked, looking at Eleanor as if she had seen a ghost. I had to close my mouth to answer. "Well, actually, she's ours," I said, pointing to Bobby and myself. "Yours? She can't be yours. We're still married." It was obvious that Vivian was having a hard time figuring out the situation. She was on the verge of collapsing to the floor. I invited her to sit on our sofa, and she did it without delay. "Relax, Viv," I said. "Bobby and I may not be married, but Eleanor is still our daughter." Vivian let out a sigh of relief. "Well, that's a little encouraging. We can put up with it." "What do you mean, Vivian? Why did you come back after all this time? Aren't we already divorced?" I was shocked to learn that I was still legally married to Vivian. She did not take any steps towards divorce, believing that I would return to her within a year. After almost 2 years of searching for me with her father, she finally plucked up the courage and asked me for reconciliation. "Reconciliation? Why now?" I replied hastily. 4 years was not enough for me to recover from the pain you caused and from your cruel behavior." Vivian expressed her deep love, saying that her whole life would not be enough to show it. She confessed that she had made a terrible mistake and apologized for trying to take advantage of his kindness. She explained that she thought that by shocking him, she would force her to return, not realizing that she would leave only for an affair for the weekend, mistaking intimacy for love. "Isn't the idea of starting a family and building a life together good enough to outweigh the temporary pleasure of a weekend fling?" "I thought you knew me better than anyone else," I replied. "You knew about my firm beliefs in loyalty. but you chose to ignore them completely. I cannot accept such disrespect from anyone, not even from my beloved wife." Her eyes scanned the room, briefly lingering on Bobby and Eleanor. "You seem to have recovered quickly," she remarked, as if nothing had changed. "Your boss at home covered for you perfectly. Even when you changed offices and started using your middle name, he kept telling Dad's investigators that Q no longer worked there. Dad had to get a court order to access Bishop's workbooks, and that's when he realized your middle name was Oliver. After that, all I had to do was pluck up the courage and come to you." "Okay, you came to me," I replied. "Despite all the past mistakes and shortcomings, I am grateful that I have a loving family that I would not trade for anything in the world. My partner is a wonderful woman whom I admire and trust completely. We are united by deep mutual respect, and we have a beautiful daughter, whom we will always cherish as she grows up and becomes a wonderful woman. Together we make a strong team, and I get great pleasure from being a part of it. As I once said, there is no I in the team, and there is certainly no I in us." My words were uttered with passion, reaching almost to a scream. For the first time, Vivian showed genuine remorse. After a quick glance at Bobby and Eleanor, I went over to my loved ones and we hugged tightly. I whispered to my girl, "It's going to be okay, my dear." "Now I understand everything, Q," Vivian said softly, looking at us. "I will file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment of marriage as soon as I return home. I don't need any financial support from you. I hope I'm not asking too much for your selfishness." "I'll try my best, Viv, but that's all I can guarantee. Maybe with time." Before I could finish my sentence, Vivian got up from the couch, smiled faintly at me and left the apartment forever, and possibly my life. Bobby sent Eleanor upstairs to play, and she sat next to me on the couch, our knees touching. I saw the same expression on Bobby's face as before. "Did you really mean what you just said to your wife? That we?" she asked. "Absolutely," I confirmed. "I know there are no romantic feelings between us, but I care about you. I completely trust you, respect you, and believe that you also respect me. And I can see that you care about both of us in general. You understand." "I understand," she replied with a simple smile. Even after the divorce, I didn't want to return to the dating scene. Before marriage, I didn't attach much importance to this, but now that I have a family, it has become even less important. I still had fun from time to time, but finding a new partner wasn't the main thing for me. Bobby, on the other hand, was more active in dating and led a more intense social life. Despite our differences, we constantly communicated and informed each other about our acquaintances. Our daughter has always been our top priority. We had a rule of not bringing home dates, except for dinners. When Eleanor was about 11 years old, Bobby and I decided it was time to tell her the truth about our family. The night we planned to do this, we were both on edge. We've been talking about this for almost a year. That evening, the three of us shed tears, talking about photos of Eleanor's biological mother and explaining her connection to Bobby and me. We also had to talk about Angel's bisexuality and Bobby's lesbianism. In addition, we had to justify our choice, not to give Eleanor to the state, but to educate her ourselves. "We may not be blood relatives, but we are connected by love," Bobby concluded. Eleanor looked confused and worried as she digested the information we shared with her. She was an intelligent and perceptive child, and after a few days, it seemed that she understood and accepted our explanations. "Couldn't you just let the custody service pick me up? Wouldn't that be easier for both of you?" she asked over dinner. "Doing the right thing is not always easy," I replied. "I've never doubted my decision, except perhaps when you got sick and threw up a birthday cake on my new suit when you were 6 years old. And I'm sure Mom didn't doubt it either." Bobby, who had tears in her eyes, nodded, wiping her nose with a napkin. Apart from the friendship between individuals, Bobby and I have created a strong bond as a couple. We met with friends from time to time. Bobby loved dancing, and from time to time we would join in the fun. She was definitely a more skilled dancer than me, but I had to make an effort to keep up with her. Our friends, who knew we weren't a couple, often commented on how well we complemented each other on the dance floor. Although Bobby sometimes danced with other friends during our walks, she always politely declined invitations from strange men for obvious reasons. Despite her charm, she has never lacked attention from both sexes. Despite the fact that most men respected her polite refusals, there were those who did not like it. One such incident occurred when she returned to our table after dancing with our friend John. The man, who seemed to be younger than her in age, was offended by her refusal. "Come on, honey, I'm better than the guy you just danced with or the one you're sitting with," he insisted. "Give me a chance," he demanded, grabbing her wrist and trying to pull her back onto the dance floor. Despite the fact that I was slim, tall, and had a decent weight, at the age of 41 I was still in good physical shape. I couldn't just watch someone mistreat my friend, so I started acting. I grabbed the hand holding Bobby's wrist tightly, twisted it, making the young guy cry out in pain, and let Bobby go. But it was a serious mistake on his part. Freeing herself from the grip, Bobby quickly turned to him and delivered a precise knee strike. "Oh, did I mention that she played college football?" The young man fell to the floor, hitting his face on the table. When the bar manager and the bouncer came to our table, they found a young man curled up in a fetal position, his face covered in red liquid. The police were called, and after we testified, we were told that neither Bobby nor I would be charged. I'm grateful for the help, but Al Clarkson's daughters had self-defense skills even before we started dating, regardless of who we were dating at the time. Tonight, Bobby commented on a serious mistake by a young man. I suggested that the next time he and Mom come to visit, Dad would teach Eleanor, because I like his approach. After we moved into a 5-bedroom house a few years ago and renovated, we now have, in fact, 2 bedrooms with bathrooms. Our spacious family room also has a built-in snack area, making our house a favorite gathering place for Eleanor and her friends. Bobby and I easily took on the responsibility of being surrogate parents for several teenagers, and to be honest, we both enjoyed it. I found out that Bobby had been in a relationship with the same woman for about 2 months when she invited her to join Eleanor and me for dinner on Saturday. It became clear to me that this woman holds a special place in Bobby's heart when she confidently asked me to leave the kitchen and cooked her best dish, veal parmigiana with spaghetti. Stephanie Ellis made an amazing first impression. Compared to Bobby, who scored 8 to 9 points, Stephanie easily scored 9 to 9.5 points thanks to her striking facial features. With big brown eyes, a flawless porcelain complexion, curly shoulder-length dark brown hair, and a figure resembling a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, she was truly stunning. After Stephanie arrived, Eleanor whispered to me, "Dad, seriously, you should let Mom play the matchmaker for you. She has a talent for it." I couldn't disagree more. "Maybe you guessed it, dear," I replied. Stephanie's charm lay not only in her appearance, but also in her character. I found it very pleasant. Eleanor liked her quickly, and Bobby was just thrilled. The happiness in Bobby's eyes when Stephanie was around warmed my heart. It also awakened memories of my own past, buried deep in my mind, which caused me a slight feeling of envy. It took Stephanie a while to get used to the close relationship between Bobby and me, but eventually she adjusted. Bobby and I had a special bond because we were the joint parents of a child who had been raised together since the age of 2, and our connection went beyond simple, friendly communication. We shared everything with each other, from the mundane to the profound. I was surprised when Stephanie called me a few weeks after her regular visits and asked if we could have lunch together. I was asked to keep this information a secret from Bobby, and although I doubted it, I reluctantly agreed. 2 days later, I was sitting in a restaurant when Stephanie came in, saw me, and came to my table. When she sat down, I couldn't help but notice the envy on the faces of some of the men around us, which made me giggle softly. It was a reminder that fantasies often surpass reality. After exchanging greetings and ordering food, Stephanie wasted no time and moved on to the main topic of conversation. She expressed her doubts about Bobby's relationship with me and her reluctance to enter into a relationship with someone who may already be in a serious relationship. Stephanie looked worried about my answer. "Wow," I said. "If only it were true. Amazing women like Bobby don't usually date guys like me, even if she's not a lesbian. However, I'll take it as a compliment." I added, "But you're right." After spending an hour discussing family relationships, Stephanie began to understand and appreciate rye whiskey more deeply, until we both stayed up late. Before we broke up, Stephanie said, "All right, accept me into your ranks. It will be an honor for me to become a part of this family." 6 months later, Bobby and Stephanie got married. Having lost my father many years ago, I had the honor of escorting Bobby down the aisle on her wedding day. Among her bridesmaids was 15-year-old Eleanor, strikingly similar to her late mother with red hair and blue eyes. Watching Eleanor, I couldn't help feeling anxious about the role of a teenage girl's father in high school, which brought back memories of my own teenage years. Bobby and Stephanie later told me that I didn't handle the situation as gracefully as they had hoped. Bobby strongly objected to the idea of using physical threats against high school students who kissed his daughter, citing the example of a previous case when Eleanor was embarrassed on a date. "Did you see how embarrassed she was? You've completely starved her," I protested. Stephanie agreed and added, "You won't go on her dates anymore." She assumed that one of them would be able to effectively convey Bobby's good wishes to Eleanor's future dates. The women insisted that Bobby apologize. "Dad, would you react the same way if I started dating women?" Eleanor asked. "Probably not, but then you'd have to deal with Mom and Stephanie. It wouldn't be any easier for your friend," I replied. Eleanor paused. A mixture of emotions reflected on her face. "As much as I hate to admit it, it could be even worse," she agreed. I giggled, feeling relieved when she left. Few phrases strike fear into a man's heart like, "We need to talk." But in my case, the situation was more confusing than alarming when Bobby said those words on Friday night. Eleanor was out with friends, so she brought me to the formal living room, usually used only for guests. Stephanie was already there and looked visibly nervous. When I entered, she handed me a glass, filled apparently with Angel's Envy rye, and gestured to a cozy armchair with a padded back so that I could sit in it. Bobby and Stephanie were sitting on the couch, each holding a glass of white wine. I felt completely confused. "You understand me, ladies? I sincerely apologize for all the mistakes I may have made, and I assure you that they will not happen again," I said sincerely. "Never," I added firmly. The two women exchanged puzzled glances until Bobby finally understood the situation. "Calm down, Oliver, it's not what you imagine. But let's save this apology in case of future mistakes, okay?" Bobby laughed. "I have a request for you," she continued cautiously. She looked at me, then swallowed nervously and tried to speak, but with difficulty. Finally, Stephanie intervened. "Is it possible? Can we borrow some of your seed, Oliver?" said Stephanie. There was an awkward silence in the room and we all exchanged nervous glances. Excuse me?" I stuttered, feeling the full weight of the moment. "Oh shit. Why is it so difficult?" Bobby muttered to herself. Finally, Bobby spoke, breaking the tension. "Stephanie and I talked and decided that we want to have a baby. We were wondering if you would like to help us with this," she said, and her words hung in the air. It took me a moment to realize what I had just been asked to do, and then a slow smile played on my face. "My smile has become one of the biggest in my entire life," I exclaimed, causing a hilarious commotion in the room as two women jumped up and down next to me like cheerful school children. "Why did you choose me?" I asked. When the excitement subsided and we sat down in our seats, they looked at each other, and wide smiles appeared on both their faces. "It may be hard to believe, but we chose you for your intelligence, charm, respectful attitude, good looks, and physical fitness," Bobby said. "You are a wonderful father and a wonderful person. We thought it would be great if our child inherited some of these wonderful qualities." I rarely cry, but that day was an exception. I cried like a newborn. If you're interested, I can sell you my half of the house so you can— No, no, Bobby interrupted. We really want you to stay with us. We were hoping that you would help us raise a child, as we raised Eleanor together. I think we did a great job with her, don't you think? I am very proud to be raising our daughter, and I really enjoyed this activity. Although I was a little worried about Stephanie's thoughts, it turned out that she had already thought it all out. Stephanie noted that, according to research, children develop well if there is both a mother and a father in the house. Then she thought about how a child who would have two mothers, a father and a sister, would develop before Eleanor left for college. Through tears, I managed to express my gratitude. I love you all so much, I sobbed. Later that evening, over dinner, Eleanor and I shared our plans. Jumping up from her seat, she hugged Bobby and Stephanie tightly. I can't believe I'm going to be an older sister. How incredible it is, Eleanor exclaimed joyfully. 2 months later, Bobby, Eleanor, and I were looking forward to Stephanie coming out of the bedroom to confirm her pregnancy. When she came out with tears of joy, we all hugged together. Personally, my heart was filled with emotions when I remembered that just over 13 years ago, I could not have imagined that I would have the opportunity to become a parent. I was on the verge of giving birth to my second child, which was only a few months away. The family, as I understood it, can take on different shapes and outlines. I have always admired Eleanor for her intelligence and how she has matured over the years. She calmly coped with all the difficulties of our family, even when she was teased by others. Despite possible obstacles, such as the fact that Bobby is a lesbian, Bobby and I are not married, and each of us has different last names, Eleanor rarely expressed dissatisfaction with the difficulties she faced. As our family was replenished with new members and surnames, we decided to keep Eleanor's former surname, as it was indicated on her birth certificate. Despite criticism from others, Eleanor was liked by her peers and often invited them to gatherings at our house, whether they were football friends or bandmates. While children were generally more inclusive, some adults were less accepting. Sometimes we heard rumors and gossip from adults. When we were around, the atmosphere usually calmed down, perhaps because few people wanted to stand up to me, and even fewer were brave enough to challenge Bobby, known for her quick wit and fierce defense of our family. Eleanor took second place in the class and was chosen to deliver the graduation speech. Despite my verbal talent, when I offered to help her, she said that I had already done enough and no longer needed help. Strangely, she never rehearsed a speech in front of me. I've been looking forward to Eleanor's speech, but unfortunately I'll have to wait to hear it with Bobby and Stephanie. On the day of graduation, when we entered the hall with Robert Alex Ellis, who was almost a year old, we were constantly stopped by women admiring the baby, which led to delays. Eleanor's speech was supposed to be the second address at the ceremony, and I couldn't help but chuckle when I saw its title, "I'm Not on the Team," printed in the program. Her speech focused on the power of teamwork to overcome personal flaws and emphasized the importance of working together. Using the example of our family, she showed how our differences can create a strong and successful group. That day I felt a sense of pride listening to her words. Eleanor's speech brought many to tears. The whole family went on a trip to Arizona State University to see Eleanor off for her freshman year of college. We left Santa Fe earlier than planned, which allowed us to enjoy some of the tourist attractions before saying goodbye to Eleanor. As we were preparing to leave, we lined up to hug Eleanor one last time. I found myself at the end of the queue, and remembering this moment, I understand that this order was intentional. "Dad, please promise me that you will make more efforts to find a good partner," she said. When the others went to the car, she said to me in a low voice, "I know that finding a partner wasn't a priority for you while I was at home, but now that I'm gone, Mom has found a good partner. You deserve it too," she said softly. I replied, "I'll try, but it's not easy to find someone like Stephanie." It seemed to me that Robert started calling me Dad, and my heart was filled with joy every time he said it. It surprised me that he called Bobby and Stephanie Mom, but they always knew who he was talking to. Despite the absence of a noticeable difference in pronunciation, both women always understood him perfectly. When Eleanor graduated from Arizona State University, she asked me to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, and that was my main responsibility at this event. Bobby and Stephanie performed most of the important tasks cheerfully and with laughter. I mostly played a financial role and entertained my 7-year-old son, Robert. Although Jack Lassiter seemed like a good guy to me, I firmly warned him not to offend my daughter. I promised that I would only interfere in their marriage if Eleanor behaved badly. Jack seemed to understand, although his voice was strained, perhaps because at that moment I was holding him in a chokehold with one hand. Without hesitation, I felt it necessary to emphasize the importance of my actions as a father, who may seem overly caring. Despite the fact that I am already in my 50s, I tried to keep fit by going to the gym 3 times a week. The wedding went great, and I appreciated every moment of this momentous day for my daughter. I tried to communicate with the guests at every table. I enjoyed delicious food and drinks and danced with many women. While I was chatting with friends, one energetic woman with silver-purple hair grabbed my arm and dragged me onto the dance floor. "Do you have any requirements for your partner's height, stud?" she joked as we danced, eliciting laughter from our friends. "By the way, I'm Aunt Deb," she added. When we settled down on the dance floor, she greeted me. "I'm Jack's mom's best friend," she announced. "In the past, I even changed your new son-in-law's diapers from time to time." With a mischievous grin, she mentioned that her nephew had praised me and warned her about my infamous chokehold. Flashing a flawless smile and bright blue eyes, she took my hand and we started dancing. I couldn't help but admire her athletic physique, reminiscent of a gymnast's body. As the music filled the room, I noticed how gracefully she danced to lively melodies. When a slower song started playing, she quickly closed the distance between us. "You must be working out a lot," Deb remarked as we walked hand in hand to the bar for a drink. I felt like she was marking her territory, and it didn't bother me. But if that's the case, then she'll have to get past Bobby and Stephanie, who were known as the American version of the Spanish Inquisition. I led her to our table and began to introduce her. I was relieved when my 2 best friends decided to give her some time before peppering them with questions. "I'll get you another drink," I said with a smile and stood up. Jack's mother came up to me at the bar and looked at Deb, who was sitting with Bobby and Stephanie, with a satisfied look. "She seems to have a short temper, but I've heard that the 3 of you take great care of each other," Marcia Lassiter commented. "Let's see how she handles all the questions." Having been instructed to wait a few minutes before returning, I followed it exactly. Marcia took this opportunity to tell me some details about Deb's past. Deb was a little younger than me. She was 55 years old, and she had been married for 15 years before she discovered her husband's infidelity about 10 years ago. Marcia told how Deb quickly figured out the situation, literally kicking her husband and then kicking him out the door. When I returned to the table 5 minutes later, I found 3 women laughing uncontrollably. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this story. I felt even more restless than when I left. 2-year-old Kayla Lassiter was running around our big house with our 2 Labrador retrievers, and her laughter filled the rooms. Her parents were sitting at the kitchen table drinking iced tea, and 4 of her 6 grandparents joined them. Jack and Eleanor, who lived only 45 minutes away, often came to visit and spent time with us and our first granddaughter. Jack's parents, Marcia and Tom, admitted that they are a little jealous of our constant visits. To remedy the situation, we invited them to join us for Christmas week, so that all 6 grandparents and Robert could celebrate the holiday together. Marcia gladly accepted the invitation, especially since it meant reuniting with her best friend Deb, whom she hadn't seen since Deb and I got married and moved to Santa Fe. Tom had to be persuaded a little more before he agreed to come with us. He admitted that he felt uncomfortable around Bobby and Stephanie, and admitted that he had never had an intimate relationship with lesbians before. I reassured him by saying, "They're just like any other married couple, Tom." I stressed that I fully trust them, as well as him and Marcia. "They're both very attractive," he admitted. He admitted that he had a preconceived opinion about lesbians, but I grinned and assured him, "Trust me, they don't give in to stereotypes. Don't worry about it, Tom. They're just women. They probably have more shoes than both of us put together." Deb was the perfect wife that I didn't even know I needed, energetic and dynamic. While I considered myself accommodating, Deb was always on the move. Her vitality was infectious. When she first moved in with us in the spring, I had to prepare a garden for her. We were perfect for each other. After planting a lot of salad vegetables, she watched the process, and I made fun of her, saying that she looked like a cat known for its keen observation. Bobby and Stephanie quickly became close to her, almost as emotionally attached as I was. Despite their warnings to protect me if she ever harmed me, she confessed to me the next day, looking shocked by their words. "I'm sure they were serious, dear," I commented seriously. "We always support each other." "I'm sure it's serious. I never want to hurt you, but if it happens, I won't linger. I will disappear in an instant." She called it self-preservation. Deb convinced Masha and Tom that Santa Fe was the perfect place to settle down, which they did 8 years later. They retired a little earlier than expected when the house next door to ours became vacant. Tom was thrilled to learn that Bobby was one of the Premier League's cheerleaders. Bobby was a fan of Arsenal, and Tom was a devoted Crystal Palace fan. Their communication was like chatting in an English pub during a match, especially when their teams were playing against each other. When we gathered to watch the match between Arsenal and Crystal Palace, it was not uncommon to hear harsh phrases like "fuck off, you idiot," or "you lost, old man." We quickly realized that football fans, or as Americans call them, soccer fans, are much more passionate than baseball fans, as Deb, Stephanie, Marcia, and I soon found out. Jack and Eleanor decided not to take their 3 grandchildren to the match between Arsenal and Crystal Palace. It was a beautiful summer evening in Santa Fe, and I was relaxing on the swing on the porch of my house, savoring a glass of Jameson Black Barrel Irish whiskey, and feeling grateful for my blessings. Suddenly, my eldest granddaughter appeared from the back door and sat down next to me. Leaning her slender body against mine, I couldn't help but notice how much she looked like her late grandmother. Dark red hair and bright blue eyes. "What are you thinking, Grando?" "About what?" she asked, using a special nickname she had come up with for me. "I was just thinking about my life and how lucky I was," I replied. "And how?" she asked curiously. After taking a sip of whiskey, I thought about how to explain to a 9-year-old girl. "Well, honey, I have repeatedly encountered situations where at first everything seemed bleak, but in the end, everything turned out well. It's like when I hurt my knee, but then Grandma Deb cheered me up with ice cream," my granddaughter Kayla shared, and her eyes shone with newfound understanding. I couldn't help but smile at her, pleased that she was getting into my feelings. "Yes, that's right," I confirmed, feeling grateful for her understanding. As it became known to me, my ex-wife Vivian never married after our divorce. Her happiness could not be influenced by her influential father. Her selfishness greatly influenced her life, and at the age of 51, she died of substance abuse surrounded by 3 cats. I'm Michael Fulham, a 27-year-old technical sergeant serving in the United States Air Force. Currently stationed in Afghanistan, my duties alternate between sniper and spotter roles. My partner in this work is my close friend and fellow staff sergeant, Nigel Buford. Military service runs deep in my family's veins. Right after high school, I enlisted, continuing a proud tradition. My father, a veteran of 28 years, now enjoys retirement in Central Texas. My grandparents also reside nearby, in a retirement community, with my grandfather having devoted 35 years to the Air Force. Before him, my great-grandfather served in the Army Air Corps during World War II, cementing a legacy of military dedication in my lineage. During my time studying in Mississippi, I met my wife, Aurora Peterson. Like me, Aurora comes from a military background. Both her parents served in the Air Force and are now planning retirement in Central Florida. When I was assigned to Patrick Air Force Base near Melbourne, Florida, it felt like a stroke of luck. Being close to Aurora's parents, Robert and Miley, brought us tremendous support, especially when our son Christopher was born 3 years ago. Having family nearby was invaluable for childcare, and it inspired me to start a small cleaning business to secure our son's future. The business began modestly, handling cleaning tasks for our church, but it soon expanded to include inspections of base housing. Over time, it evolved into a small enterprise employing 15 to 18 people, many of whom are military spouses or personnel. While I manage sales and operations, Aurora takes care of accounting and scheduling. Today, our business serves a strip mall, a 3-story office building, and several base housing units. We've even added staff for heavier cleaning jobs. For most of my 8-year Air Force career, I worked as an avionics systems technician. However, when a call went out for snipers in Iraq and Afghanistan, it opened a new door. My consistent expert marksmanship scores caught the attention of my superiors, who offered me a spot on a sniper team. The added danger pay was an incentive, and Aurora supported my decision wholeheartedly. By then, Christopher was 3 years old and growing fast. I underwent sniper training at a facility in Georgia, alongside Marine and Army snipers. There, I met Nigel Buford, who hailed from upstate New York. Since we were the only Air Force members in the program, teaming up made sense. Most participants paired within their respective services, though there were a few mixed Army-Marine teams. Nigel and I excelled, finishing second and third overall, just behind one such mixed team. After training, Nigel, who had been stationed at McGuire AFB in New Jersey, received reassignment orders to Patrick AFB. Together, we embarked on an 18-month deployment to Afghanistan. 10 months in, we had already completed numerous missions. While regular calls and Skype sessions with Aurora, Christopher, and our parents brought some comfort, they couldn't replace the feeling of being home. One evening during a Skype call with Aurora, I noticed a shadow in the background. When I asked if it was Christopher, she explained he was staying at her parents' house for the week. She guessed it might have been one of our cleaning employees checking in, given the time. I dismissed it as nothing unusual and didn't think much of it. The following day, I received an unexpected call from Andrew Mendoza, a close friend who occasionally helped with our cleaning business and babysitting. He sounded distressed as he shared troubling news. Aurora was being unfaithful. While stopping by to check on her, he found the door unlocked and caught her in an intimate situation with another man. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Reeling from the shock, I tried to absorb Andrew's words. He provided additional details, expressing deep regret for having to tell me. We discussed a plan of action, and he agreed to gather more evidence discreetly. I suggested reaching out to an attorney and recalled a law firm, Stein and Green, connected to one of our office cleaning contracts. Andrew promised to contact them for advice and keep me informed. Devastated, I wrestled with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. Aurora and I had shared 6 years of what felt like a solid, loving marriage. Despite the challenges of deployment, our relationship had seemed unshakable. Was it my extended absence that had strained our bond? Determined to address the situation, I headed to the headquarters building in search of legal guidance. At the reception desk, an Army sergeant listened as I briefly explained my situation and directed me to an attorney. I was soon ushered into a room to meet Colonel Lane, a senior officer who greeted me warmly. With a heavy heart, I prepared to share my story, hoping for guidance on navigating this deeply personal crisis. The colonel stepped away from his desk, extending a hand with a warm smile. "It's good to meet you, Sergeant Fulham. Please, take a seat and start from the beginning," he said as he returned to his chair and picked up a legal pad. "Take your time. I want to hear everything." I began sharing everything Andrew had told me, recounting every detail with precision. I even described my frantic efforts earlier that morning to find a lawyer who would take the case. By the time I finished, I felt utterly depleted. My chest was heaving with sobs I couldn't control, leaving me slouched in the chair, weak and fragile as if my very essence had melted away. I wasn't even sure I had the strength to stand and leave the room. The colonel reached for the phone and made a call. "Vic, it's Charlie," he said calmly. "I've got someone here who could use your help. He's had one of those calls from home, the kind that knocks you down. No, it's not the worst-case scenario, but he's in a bad place and needs support. Can you make it over here?" After typing briefly on his computer, he added, "Also, see if you can contact USAF Staff Surgeon Nigel Buford. He might be able to assist as well. No rush. He's safe here for now, but come as soon as you can. Thanks, Vic." Hanging up, the colonel turned his full attention back to me. "Son, help is on its way. Someone who understands exactly what you're dealing with will be here shortly, and we'll try to bring Nigel in as well. You're not alone in this." I tried to offer a polite exit. "Sir, I don't want to inconvenience you. I can wait elsewhere if you need your office back." He dismissed the notion with a wave of his hand. "Absolutely not, Michael. You can stay here as long as you need. I understand this is a heavy blow, but you'll get through it. It might take time, maybe a lot of time, but the pain will ease. I've been where you are. Betrayal cuts deep, but it's something you can survive. Even a decade later it may still sting, but it becomes manageable. You will find a way." His voice softened as he leaned forward. "The hardest part is rediscovering your sense of worth, believing you're still deserving of love. I know how difficult that is. For me, it took nearly 5 years before I could look forward to life again. There were moments when I thought I'd reached the end of my rope, but someone stepped in, a true angel of mercy, and pulled me back from the brink. That person helped me heal. Now, I try to do the same for others. I hope it helps you to know you're not the first to face this, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the train you're afraid of. It's real hope." I absorbed his words in silence. He had endured the same kind of torment I was facing and had come out the other side. If he had survived, perhaps I could as well. Maybe. As I mulled over his message, questions swirled in my mind. Could I recover as he had? Did I have the strength to claw my way back to a semblance of normalcy? The answers were elusive, but I knew 2 things for sure. First, I had to hold myself together for Christopher. He deserved better than broken parents. Second, I had to ensure Aurora would never have the chance to hurt him the way she had hurt me. She had forfeited her right to be a mother. Anger simmered beneath the surface as I thought of her betrayal. If she could abandon her family for a fleeting indulgence, what would stop her from doing it again? Or worse, what if this wasn't the first time? The possibility of a long history of deceit made my blood boil. The thought of confronting her, unleashing my anger, flared briefly in my mind before I pushed it aside. Another question arose. Had her parents known? Had they kept her secrets from me? I doubted it. I had always called them Mom and Pop, and they had been closer to me than my own family. But would they stand by their daughter if I revealed my plans? I couldn't be sure. Blood ties complicate everything. I'd have to approach them carefully. A knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Father Vittorio Barducci entered, followed closely by Nigel. Without a word, Nigel knelt before me and embraced me tightly. Father Vic's voice was gentle yet firm. "Michael, you're needed. Christopher needs you, and we're here to help you through this. Don't let her take him from you." Nigel added, "You've got to fight, buddy. We're in your corner and Andrew is already working things back home. He's gathering evidence and has a lawyer in mind. We'll figure this out together." I nodded, overwhelmed but grateful. Nigel's mention of Andrew reminded me of the progress that had already been made. "Colonel Lane," I said, "Andrew Mendoza is the friend helping me. He's working with a law firm on Atlantic Drive in Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. My cleaning company services their offices." "You own a cleaning business?" the colonel asked with interest. "Yes, sir. My wife and I started it together, but I'm the official owner. She handles the scheduling and bookkeeping while I oversee the operations." The colonel nodded thoughtfully. "That's good to know. It might come in handy." Nigel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We've got this, Michael. Rest for now and gather your strength. We'll face whatever comes next together." It appears that's the case. "Did you take care of setting up a business ID and completing the state-required forms?" "Yes. I had the legal team at the base handle all the paperwork. They submitted everything on my behalf. Now I've got both state and federal ID numbers, ensuring compliance with tax requirements and employee payroll. I manage the employee tax withholdings and file reports with the IRS every quarter. Impressive work, Michael. Everything is in order. Now let's focus on getting you fully settled. I'll contact Andrew to get the lawyer's details, and I'll oversee things until your new attorney is ready to take over. After that, we'll decide on the next steps together. For now, you and Nigel should head back to your tent while I inform your commanding officer that you'll need a bit of downtime. Thank you, Colonel Lane. Having a couple of days to process everything and clear my mind would mean a lot. Once that's done, I'd like to take on a real mission. I need to release some pent-up energy, and nothing helps me unwind quite like a mission out in the field. Colonel Lane nodded knowingly. Michael isn't exaggerating when he says that shooting helps him relax. After a mission, we're both so calm it's like floating for days. Major Kelly down south really values our approach. He says we're all business once we're in the field, even if we seem tense during briefings, and once we're back it's like a celebration. He often remarks that he wishes all his snipers could learn our style. So, both of you are snipers? Asked Father Barducci. That's right, Father. We're both trained snipers, alternating roles depending on our rest cycles. One of us handles the shooting while the other acts as a spotter. There's no competition between us about who's better. When we graduated sniper school, our scores were nearly identical, just like our stats on missions. Together, we have 54 confirmed kills and 23 probables, but we don't keep individual tallies. We figure it's about even, but what matters is completing the mission effectively. We operate as a single, cohesive unit, where success for one is success for both. That's likely why Major Kelly assigns us the toughest operations. He trusts we'll deliver. That's remarkable, Father Barducci observed. Two people working as one mind and spirit. You truly make a formidable team. Colonel Lane added, Exactly, Father. You can see it in how they work. When Nigel came to my office, his first concern was his partner. Then he gathered all the information he needed and worked to find a solution. They're the perfect example of teamwork. 2 bodies, 1 spirit. It's refreshing to see such responsibility and mutual respect among young people these days, Father Barducci remarked. Too often, it seems people are only looking out for themselves. As Colonel Lane jotted down Andrew's contact information, Nigel and I headed back to our tent. Once there, I took a couple of aspirin and collapsed onto my cot, falling asleep immediately. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I turned in, so the camp was mostly silent. Our tent was set up for night shift personnel since our missions usually happened after dark. It's where we bunked with others on similar schedules. I didn't hear a sound until my watch read 10:15 a.m. The brighter light filtering through the tent's walls confirmed it was daytime. Despite the tent's double-layered fabric, the daylight wasn't completely blocked. As I stirred, Nigel was already at my side, checking on me. You slept 8 hours, I told him. I feel okay, but I'm starving. Let's grab some food. You've been out for quite a while, Michael, Nigel noted. It's Thursday. We last spoke with Colonel Lane late Tuesday night, technically early Wednesday morning. You must have really needed the rest. We have a meeting with the Colonel tonight at 12 hours, so let's eat first. I slept for more than a day? That's surprising. I haven't crashed like that since Mission 27. Remember when we stayed awake for over 120 hours and then slept for 18 straight? This time you were out for over 34 hours, Nigel said. Definitely time to eat and regroup. Even the guys in the tent were starting to get concerned. By the way, you got some interesting calls while you were out. I made notes for you to look over. That might be why the Colonel wants to meet tonight. He's been busy making calls to Florida. We left the tent and headed for the latrines. After a quick shower and changing into clean uniforms, we made our way to the chow hall. A few of our tent mates greeted me with light-hearted jokes about being Sleeping Beauty. At the chow hall, we bumped into Sergeant Lillian Restor from the JG office. Welcome back to the land of the living, Sergeant Fulham, she said with a grin. You look much better than when you arrived the other night. It's good to see you back on your feet. Maybe now you can start living again. She paused for a moment, studying my face. I'm guessing it was a Dear John situation over Skype. Those can be tough, but you seem to be handling it better than most. The Colonel probably helped. He's excellent at dealing with those situations, especially during the early hours when it's afternoon back home. That's when most of the emotional crashes happen. Thank you for your concern, Sergeant Rester. I think I just needed a full mental and physical reset, I replied. Care to join us for lunch? I'd usually love to, but it seems like Nigel has something important to share with you, she said. Maybe dinner tonight? I'll even bring my friend Emmy. Why bring a friend? Nigel asked, raising an eyebrow. So you'll have someone to talk to, she teased, flashing a mischievous smile. Michael, my friend, I think you've managed to catch someone's eye. Maybe, I replied with a shrug. Anyone who can take a hit like I did and be back on his feet 2 days later might pique some curiosity. That's true. Plus, she added, her tone playful, I'd love to know why 2 covert pilots are hanging around an army base. Bet it's an interesting story. Catch you later, flyboys. With that, Sergeant Restor walked off, leaving us by the entrance to the mess hall. Shaking my head, I turned to Nigel. Was she hitting on me? Or am I just overthinking it? Oh, no doubt about it. She was definitely flirting with you, Michael, Nigel replied, his grin wide and teasing. But I think I'll go investigate this Amy she mentioned. Haven't come across anyone by that name yet. Besides, didn't you just say you were starving? Right, I said, nodding. Let's deal with that first. Then maybe a nap before tonight. Inside, I didn't hold back. 2 slices of meatloaf, 3 portions of roast beef, a double helping of mashed potatoes smothered in gravy, 4 bowls of veggies, 2 slices of apple pie, and a cup of ice cream later, I finally felt satisfied. Between bites, Nigel filled me in on the latest updates. Andrew had called twice, followed by the lawyer, which had led Nigel to involve the colonel. Andrew had managed to snap fresh photos of a captain we used to work with and another occasional associate. While these added weight to my custody case against Christopher, they reignited my anger. Yet I kept my cool, another reminder of who I'd married. After the meal, Nigel and I hit the gym for a bit before heading back to the tent. I took a nap to recharge, aiming to wake up refreshed for dinner and a midnight meeting with the colonel. After a quick shower, I dressed and joined Nigel for another visit to the chow hall. We had only been waiting at the entrance for a few minutes when Sergeant Restor reappeared, this time with a young Marine corporal in tow. Inside, we grabbed our trays and picked a quiet table, the same one Nigel and I had used earlier. Restor reintroduced herself as Lillian and introduced us to Corporal Amy Stevens. It was amusing how quickly Nigel and Amy hit it off. Both were from upstate New York, Nigel from Rochester and Amy from Geneva near the Finger Lakes, less than 50 miles apart. While they chatted enthusiastically, Lillian and I found ourselves deep in conversation. She was from the Lexington area in Kentucky, while I was born at Bluff B near Marysville, California, and raised in Texas near Austin. My dad had built a home on 10 acres outside Round Rock, filling it with his hobbies. I avoided mentioning my current problems, but shared stories about Aurora, Christopher, and life before my deployment. Before I realized it, my watch read 9:15. We'd been talking for over 3 hours. As we said our goodbyes, we made plans to meet again for meals, maybe a workout, or even a movie. Nigel and I then headed to the communications tent so I could check in with Aurora on Skype, as I did regularly. Back home, it was mid-morning, around 10:30. Aurora should have been working at her desk, balancing the books for payday. I found an available computer, logged in, and called her. She answered almost immediately, dressed in a nice blouse, though her hair had a small tuft sticking up. I paused, momentarily amused. Our conversation flowed as usual, filled with warm words. Nigel popped over to greet her, and the 2 of us casually watched the background for anything out of the ordinary. Toward the end of the call, Nigel noticed something, a faint shadow of a man on the wall behind Aurora. The lighting was dim, but the figure was unmistakable. My expression shifted, and Aurora caught it. "Michael, is something wrong? You've got that look," she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "It's nothing," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "I thought I saw something behind you, but it's probably just a reflection from a passing car." She seemed reassured and changed the subject. "I miss you so much, Michael. I miss your hugs, your kisses, having you here beside me. If I talk about it anymore, I'll start crying. I love you." The video feed cut off abruptly, but since I had initiated the call, the audio lingered a moment longer. That's when Nigel and I heard it. Aurora laughing softly with a man before the connection died. We stifled our laughter, though it was bitter. During her heartfelt declaration, the shadow had perfectly mimicked her gestures. In that moment, my resolve hardened. Aurora would never see Christopher again. I called my parents immediately. "Mom, I need you and Dad to get to Florida and pick up Christopher. Tell them you want to spend time with him. Aurora's cheating on me, and if he stays with the Wilsons, she'll try to visit him. Once she's served, she'll fight to take him away." My mother's gasp was audible. "She's doing what? Michael, what's happened?" "Andrew Mendoza. You remember him? He lived just around the corner with Bonnie. He walked in on her with some guy in our kitchen and got a picture. The divorce is underway, and Christopher's staying with Robert and Miley for now. Aurora's supposed to take him this weekend. You need to act fast." "We'll handle it," she promised. "I'll talk to your dad and make arrangements with Miley. Are you coming back soon to deal with this, or will it all be remote?" "I'll know more after tonight," I said. "I've got a meeting with my lawyer. He's been a tremendous help. He gets what I'm going through. Nigel's been incredible, too." Mom's tone softened. "Nigel, come say hello." Nigel leaned in with a smile. "Hi again, ma'am. Can I call you Mom? Mine doesn't have a webcam, so I only see her when she's at the library." "Of course," she said warmly. "Send me her address and we'll send her a camera. Thank you for being there for Michael." "You don't have to do that, Mom," I protested gently. "I've been urging her to upgrade her laptop so we can video chat, but I think she's hesitating because she doesn't want me to meet her new boyfriend. Ever since Dad passed away 2 years ago, she's stayed single. But lately, a man has picked up her phone a couple of times and immediately hung up, claiming I had the wrong number. I'm certain it wasn't a mistake because when I called back, either Mom answered or it went to voicemail. She's probably feeling awkward about introducing someone new," I continued. "Maybe she's worried I won't approve. I'm thinking of writing her a heartfelt note to let her know it's okay for her to move forward in her life." Nigel nodded thoughtfully. "That's a solid idea. A letter might make her feel comfortable enough to open up about this mystery man. Sometimes moms forget that their kids have grown up and can handle these things." "You're right," I agreed. "Now you two should head out. I need to help David get ready for our Florida trip. Love you both. And Mom, we'll sort this out like we always do." "Of course, son," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of motherly exasperation. "Love you too. Take care. Are you flying or driving?" "We'll talk to Robert and Miley first," she added, "then decide the best plan. Mom, please don't bring up anything about the divorce or Aurora's cheating when you talk to Robert and Miley. I want to manage this without them confronting her too soon. She deserves the same shock I felt when I found out. Promise me you won't say a word." "All right, son," she said hesitantly. "But we might gently see how they feel about infidelity just in case. They've experienced plenty of prolonged absences themselves. We'll let you know what we find out. Love you." "Love you too, Mom. Bye," I replied before hanging up. Nigel turned to me with a knowing smile. "Your mom's keeping it together remarkably well, but I can tell she's seething inside. There was a glint in her eye when you mentioned Aurora's betrayal." "When do you normally call your in-laws?" Nigel asked. "This might be a good time, especially if you want to check in on Christopher." "Good point," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let me gather myself for a moment. That call got to me. Could you grab us a couple of beers? I need one." "Coming right up," Nigel said as he headed to the kitchen. I steadied myself and dialed the Petersons' number. After a few rings, Miley picked up. "Hi, Michael. How's everything? Want me to hop on Skype so you can see Christopher?" "That would be wonderful," I said, grateful. "I didn't realize he was with you." We hung up, and moments later I saw Miley's video call icon light up. I connected the call. "Miley, you look amazing," I said warmly. "I hope Christopher hasn't been giving you too much trouble." "Oh, Michael, he's been an absolute delight," she replied with a laugh. "Honestly, I wish you had 10 more just like him." Christopher appeared suddenly, climbing into her lap. "Hi, Daddy. I miss you." When are you coming home? Mommy misses you too. Hey there, buddy, I said, my chest tightening. I miss you so much. I'm not sure when I'll be home, but maybe next month if everything works out. Really, Daddy? That's great. I've been really good, haven't I, Grandma? You've been wonderful, Miley assured him with a big smile. Michael, she said, her tone softening, is everything all right? You seem a little off today. I'm fine, I said quickly, trying to sound reassuring. It's just been hectic. It might be a while before we can chat again. Christopher, be good to your mom and grandparents, okay? Okay, Daddy. Love you. Can I go play now? Of course, buddy. Love you too, I said, my voice cracking as tears threatened to fall. Christopher darted off, leaving Miley watching me with concern. Michael, something's wrong, she pressed. Are you in danger? Is it something serious? Miley, it's not something I can discuss right now, I said carefully, but changes are coming. On another note, my parents are planning to visit soon. They might take Christopher to Disney World and you could join them. Wouldn't that be fun? Michael, don't change the subject, she said firmly. What's going on? I can't share anything yet. Maybe in a week or two. For now, I need you to trust me, I pleaded. All right, she said reluctantly. But I'll keep asking if I feel like something's off. Please don't, I begged. This has to remain confidential, even from Aurora. Fine, she sighed, but I'll expect answers soon. You owe us that much. I promise you'll know everything soon. Just hang in there, I assured her. Okay, she conceded. But don't make me wait too long. We care about you, Michael. I'll be worried sick if you keep shutting me out. I love you all, I said softly, and I'll explain everything soon. Please, just hold on a little longer. I'll explain everything when the time is right, I promise. I love you all more than you can imagine. We'll talk soon, but for now, I need to go. Those were the last words I said before ending the Skype call. Closing my laptop, I felt tears sting my eyes as I broke down yet again. I wanted nothing more than to trust them, but that trust felt impossible. Not until I could see them face to face, or until Aurora's actions had been addressed. Nigel soon came back with a couple of beers, handing one to me before we retreated into our tent. What followed was a muted, dismal little gathering where we nursed our drinks in silence. Time slipped by, the clock inching toward 11:30 p.m. as we sat lost in thought. Neither of us talked much. We were both preoccupied with our own reflections on life and the people shaping it. I shared the earlier conversation I'd had with Miley, and Nigel speculated about what her intentions might be. Was she hinting at my return home? Perhaps there was another mission on the horizon. We had no answers, only guesses. Eventually, hunger spurred us into motion, and we headed to the dining area, or whatever official term the Army had for it. There, we met up with Lillian and Amy, exchanging light-hearted banter over breakfast. Their shift was set to run from midnight to 8, so after finishing our meal, we parted ways. Nigel and I made our way toward the headquarters building, where we had a meeting scheduled with Colonel Lane. Upon arriving at the JAG office, I approached the sergeant at the desk. Good evening, Sergeant Rester. We're here for our 3 o'clock appointment with Colonel Lane. He should be expecting us. One moment, Rester said, disappearing down a hallway. He returned about 5 minutes later. Follow me. The Colonel is ready to see you now. Nigel and I entered the office and took the seats opposite Colonel Lane's desk. The Colonel was finishing a phone call, gesturing for us to wait as he wrapped up. Once he hung up, he turned his attention to us with a serious but cordial demeanor. Sergeants Fulham and Buford, good to see you both again. I have some updates for you, and they're all positive. Let's start with the good news. Your attorney in Florida has agreed to handle your divorce case free of charge. His name is Walter Groenblatt, and Ernest Stange will assist with any criminal matters if needed. They're highly capable. Also, the evidence collected leaves no doubt of infidelity on her part. This case should go uncontested, especially given your military service. I nodded, processing the information as he continued. Now, on to the even better news. Your company won't become a significant point of contention during the divorce. Florida's marital property laws entitle her to some compensation, but her claim is weak. She isn't listed as an officer of the company, so the court is likely to view her as an employee rather than a partner. Her behavior leading to the divorce will also be taken into account. Nigel leaned forward, intrigued. How does that affect things, sir? If she's been receiving a salary, she might only be eligible for additional compensation tied to her contributions, but nothing more, the colonel explained. Michael, how have you and your wife been managing the company's finances? Both of us take a salary, I replied. The profits go into a trust for our son's college fund. We reserve a small portion for operational expenses, but the bulk is locked away in the trust. Colonel Lane raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. That's a wise arrangement. Who oversees the trust? Is it you, your wife, or someone else? It's managed by Andrew Mendoza, my son's godfather. If anything happens to us, Andrew takes over the company, assumes custody of Christopher, and manages the trust. The colonel nodded approvingly. That's a solid setup. I doubt Aurora even remembers she can't access those funds. I hesitated, voicing a thought that had been haunting me. But what if Christopher isn't mine? The room fell silent. Colonel Lane immediately picked up the phone, dialing a number with urgency. Walter, it's Charles Lane. Can we arrange a DNA test for Christopher Michael? A saliva sample should suffice. Check with the hospital where he was born to see if they already have a record. Also, review the trust documents to confirm they're secure. Michael mentioned that all profits are directed to the trust. Let me know as soon as you can. Thanks. After hanging up, he looked back at me with reassurance. Michael, you've taken every precaution. Now for the great news. You're deploying tomorrow night on a mission that should only last 3 or 4 days. Once that's done, you'll have a day to wrap things up here before heading home for 15 days of leave. If you want Nigel to join you, I can make that happen. Nigel shook his head with a small smile. Thanks, sir, but I'll stay. I met someone yesterday and I'd like to see where it leads. The colonel's grin widened. Understood. You both know what you're doing. Best of luck, gentlemen. I don't have a girlfriend back home at McGuire or Patrick, and I'd regret letting this opportunity slip away by taking time off. I hope you can understand my perspective. Michael, Nigel, I'd feel awful if my actions ruined your chances with Amy. She's incredible for you, Michael. The fact that you both grew up just 50 miles apart seems like a strong connection you shouldn't ignore, and I'd feel selfish intruding on that. Stay here, and when I get back, I hope to hear some great news from you. Oh, and one last thing. I need both of you to sign this document. Michael, add your signature along with today's date, and Nigel, you'll sign as a witness. Afterward, I'll send it over to Walter so we can move forward with serving Aurora. Would it be possible to hold off on delivering the papers until I'm back? I'd like to hand them to her personally, maybe about 15 minutes after I've walked through the door. That's brutal, Michael, Nigel remarked with a smirk. I just want to see the expression on her face when she reads them, Michael replied. It's a small payback for the shock I got from Andrew's call. Nigel's right, that's ice cold, the colonel said with a chuckle. But honestly, I'm all for it. If you manage to capture her reaction, I wouldn't mind seeing it myself. A little indirect revenge might brighten my day too. No problem, Colonel, Michael said. If it's as dramatic as I think it'll be, maybe I'll enlarge the photo to poster size and hang it in the living room. I'm not so sure about that, the colonel cautioned. What would your son think? Michael paused, reflecting. You're right, Colonel, but it would remind me to be more cautious with my trust in the future. That's a lesson worth holding on to, the colonel agreed. Now I have more work to handle. You two should head back to your tent and rest up. The coming days will likely leave little room for sleep. Major Kelly assures me you're the only team capable of handling what's ahead. Good luck, and make it back safe so we can get you on a plane home. Thank you for everything, Colonel, Michael said sincerely. I don't know if I've earned all this support, but I'm truly grateful. My son would thank you too if he understood. That goes double for me, Nigel added. Michael's more than a friend to me. He's like a twin. When one of us hurts, the other feels it. You two share something rare, the colonel noted. What do you think will happen when your tours end and you're posted to different locations? We've talked about it in the field, Nigel said. We'll stay best friends no matter what. We'll always keep track of where the other is, and maybe someday when we retire, we'll settle down near each other, or maybe not. Who can say? My dad has friends all over the world, Michael added. They stay in touch, reminiscing and catching up. He says it keeps him connected and never lonely. I'll follow his example. The colonel nodded thoughtfully. That's a wise approach. Maybe I'll reach out to some old friends myself. Thanks for the idea, Michael. Now get some rest. Walter and I will manage things here. Just focus on coming back safely. Thank you, Colonel. We appreciate everything, Nigel said as they stepped out of the office. On their way out, Michael paused at the reception desk to speak with Lillian. Sergeant Rester, Nigel and I will be out on duty for a few days. When I return, I'd like to have a conversation with you, if you're open to it. Nothing formal, just a chance to get to know each other better. Lillian smiled warmly. I'd like that, Sergeant Fulham. I'm not seeing anyone right now, and a change of pace might be nice. Nigel grinned mischievously. No more ground pounders or jarheads for you, huh? Lillian laughed. Not making any promises, but there is one flyboy who's caught my eye. You two should get moving, she added. I hear you have work to do. 5 days later, a helicopter brought them back from their mission. They confirmed 8 kills, with 4 additional probable targets eliminated. Hidden in a mountain cave near Dar, insurgents had camouflaged the entrance with a tarp. By daybreak, they'd drive vehicles into the cave and wait until nightfall to move deeper into the valley. Michael recalled noticing the tarp. At first, it looked like a rock swaying in the wind. Once I realized it was fabric, we set up to ambush them that night. When the Marines arrived later, they confirmed 12 fatalities and discovered a cache of weapons, supplies, and bunking arrangements inside the cave, clearly a hub for their operations. After collecting useful documents, the Marines destroyed the site. Back at base, Michael met with Colonel Lane, who handed him flight orders and instructions for his stateside responsibilities. When you're home, contact Major Kenneth Riley. He'll coordinate your flights to Patrick. Once you arrive, Walter Groenblad will help with serving the papers. He'll make sure the process server shows up about 15 minutes after you get home. Would you prefer to call your wife from Atlanta, or wait until you're there? Michael made his decision. I'll wait. I want her to see the papers when she's alone. What about your son? The colonel asked. Christopher's staying with my parents in Florida this week, Michael answered. They'll keep him until Wednesday. I'll be home by Monday afternoon. The colonel nodded in approval. Everything's arranged then. Good luck, Michael. Reaching out to her is entirely your choice. Thank you for everything, Colonel. I'll make sure to capture her response with a photo. My phone's camera is reliable for that. You have a few tasks to wrap up and a ride to catch, so you can make that moment happen. Best wishes to you. Thank you. I'll be back soon, hopefully. In the meantime, I'm placing Christopher temporarily under my in-laws' care since they're nearby. Walter has the necessary paperwork ready for you to sign. Thank you again. It's my privilege to serve in the military, and that's why I'm here. Afterward, I went back to my tent, where I found Nigel waiting. My bag was already laid out, and he had packed it neatly with socks, underwear, and spare uniforms. All that remained were my toiletries and an extra pair of boots. My formal attire was at home. Here I only had combat gear and a few personal items. I embraced Nigel, said goodbye, and stepped outside to find my ride. Outside, a Humvee idled, and a private first class stood at the door, holding it open. I stowed my duffel bag in the back, climbed in, and we headed to the airstrip. From there, everything became a blur. I landed in Atlanta at dawn, around 6 a.m., and transferred to an Army helicopter that brought me to Fort Stewart. I had an hour before my C-130 flight to Patrick Air Force Base in Florida, so I decided to call Aurora. Hello? Hi, Aurora. I'm back in the States in Georgia right now. I managed to secure a flight home. I'll be back this afternoon. Michael, you're coming home today? How? Why? This afternoon, you're sure? I need to prepare for you. My parents are here and so are yours. They even brought Shone. This isn't part of a big plan, love. The only surprise is my visit. Everything else is just coincidence. I'll be home soon and can't wait to see you. But I have to go now. See you soon, baby. I love you. Love you too. Bye. I ended the call, feeling a wave of frustration rising. I took several deep breaths, the same ones I used to steady my nerves before taking a critical shot. Once I was composed, I called Walter to arrange a courier. After that, I boarded the flight to Patrick Air Force Base. When we landed, the plane taxied to the operations building. I disembarked, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. Nearby stood a civilian van marked Melbourne Courier Service. A stocky man about my height, with thick black hair and a holstered sidearm, waited beside it. His casual attire, a polo shirt and jeans, gave him the look of an off-duty cop rather than a courier. "I'm Technical Sergeant Fulham. Are you here for me?" I asked. "Yes, Sergeant," he replied. "I'll drive you home and deliver a package to your wife. It's scheduled to arrive 15 minutes after you walk in the door. I was notified while your plane was still an hour out." "Let's get going. I told Aurora I'd be home by 2 p.m., and I'm exhausted. I just want this done." "Sure thing. Hop in." I climbed into the passenger seat, fastened my seatbelt, and settled in. About 15 minutes later, I was unloading my bag when Aurora burst out of the house, calling my name. She ran toward me, throwing herself into my arms. Despite everything I knew, I held her. Her excitement seemed genuine, though I couldn't ignore what had been happening behind my back. I set my bag down and embraced her, kissed her, and wiped away her tears, tears that felt more sorrowful than joyful. With my duffel in hand, we walked inside together. "Honey, I'm parched. Military flights don't serve drinks, and I can't remember my last proper meal. Can we pause the reunion until I've eaten? I might collapse from hunger." "Of course, baby. I'll warm up some leftover casserole and grab you a soda. I'm so happy you're home." I sank into my recliner in the living room, unwilling to sit at the kitchen table. That table, like our bed, felt tainted. Aurora chattered away from the kitchen while preparing my meal. She brought me the soda first, perched on my lap, and kissed me until the microwave timer interrupted. Then she darted back to the kitchen and returned with a steaming plate of casserole. As I placed the plate on the side table, the doorbell rang. It was time to act. "That must be for me," I said. "Probably my redeployment orders. I'll get it." Aurora stayed in the kitchen as I opened the door. A man handed me a large manila envelope and asked for Mrs. Aurora Fulham. "Honey, this is for you. Were you expecting something?" I called out. "No, Michael, what is it?" she replied. I stepped aside as she took the envelope. With my camera ready, I captured her reaction as she scanned the papers. Her eyes widened in shock. That's when I took the photo I had been waiting for. Moments later, she fainted. I caught her before she hit the ground, carried her to the sofa, and returned to my lunch. A few minutes later, she regained consciousness, glaring at me with an expression filled with venom. I captured that image myself. What did you expect me to do? Did you honestly think I would stand by quietly, letting your betrayal pass without a response? I'm utterly devastated by your actions. Did it never occur to you that I would uncover the truth about your deceit? Michael, love, you've got it all wrong. It wasn't what it looked like. It only happened once, and I never meant to hurt you. I was lonely. You mean everything to me. Please believe me, I'm so sorry you found out like this, she pleaded, desperation in her voice. But I stopped her, my tone icy and unyielding. Don't insult me with your lies, Aurora. This wasn't some one-off slip. It's been multiple times with different people. That much I've already uncovered. I could almost comprehend someone like Anthony Conway. He's got that charisma. But Zachary Kaufman? He couldn't charm his way out of a paper bag. And then there's the captain you've been involved with for over a year. Shaking my head in disgust, I continued, No, Aurora, this ends here. You're leaving. Pack your things and get out. I can't even bear to look at you anymore. I'm going to see my son. I hesitated, the words catching painfully in my throat. Is he even mine? Do you even know? Aurora crumbled onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I grabbed my truck keys and duffel bag, determined to leave. But as I reached the end of the street, the crushing weight of it all hit me. I broke down, leaning over the steering wheel, tears pouring uncontrollably. 10 minutes later, I spotted Anthony Conway's car turning onto my street and heading toward my house. Anger reignited. I spun the truck around and sped back. Bursting through the door, I found Anthony awkwardly attempting to console Aurora. Anthony, get out of my house before I throw you out myself. You've done enough damage without playing the hero here, I snapped. Michael, you're being unreasonable. he retorted. "I'm just trying to help." "Help?" I laughed bitterly. "She doesn't deserve your sympathy. Do you really believe you're the only one? My God, you do. She's been with so many others, Anthony. I bet she told you the same thing, that you were special, her only one. Am I right?" His face fell, the realization sinking in. Without another word, Anthony glanced at Aurora and left. Aurora turned to me again, her voice trembling. "Michael, please, we can fix this. We can work through it, can't we?" I shook my head firmly. "Our marriage ended the moment you betrayed your vows. It's over. The divorce papers are ready and I'll expect your signature. How far back does this even go? I know about Lieutenant Esteban. That was 14 months ago. What came before him? Tell me the truth." Her voice cracked as she admitted, "He was the first. When you didn't notice, I allowed myself to do it again. I thought I could keep it hidden if I was careful. The times I scheduled cleanings gave me opportunities, and I took them. It wasn't about you, Michael. You were everything a partner should be. It was me. Something was broken in me." "Broken?" I repeated angrily. "Was I not enough? Was our life together so meaningless to you?" "No," she cried. "You were perfect. You gave me everything I needed. But that first time, Samuel told me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, and I believed him. I hated myself afterward, but when he called again, I couldn't resist. It became easier and I couldn't stop. I'm so sorry, Michael." She took a deep, shaky breath. "I'll go. I'll pack my things and leave tonight. Maybe I'll stay with Susie Henderson. I'll take Christopher and—" "No," I interrupted sharply. "You will not take Christopher. You will never see him again. You forfeited that right. Sign the papers, and this ends. My parents will care for him while I'm overseas. You can explain to your parents why our marriage fell apart. Tell them the truth. I can't forgive you, Aurora. I've tried, but I can't." "Yes, Michael," she whispered, her voice defeated. She opened the envelope, her face paling as she read through the contents. A few sections made her gasp. Evidence, I assumed. She signed the documents, placed them back in the envelope, and retreated to the bedroom. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched casserole in front of me. My soda had gone flat. My hands cradled my head as tears I thought I no longer had spilled freely. Aurora emerged occasionally, carrying her belongings to her car. On her final trip inside, she knelt before me. "Michael, I'm so sorry for everything. I can never undo what I've done to you and Christopher. I loved you truly, but I craved attention. I think it was the danger, the forbidden nature of it. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your love. Tell Christopher I'm sorry. Maybe tell him I'm dead so he doesn't have to bear the burden of knowing who I really am." She stood, her voice barely audible. "I'll leave the rest of my things to Susie, or throw them away. I won't trouble you again. Goodbye, Michael." She hugged me one final time, pressed a kiss to my head, and walked out. I sat there through the night, unmoving, hollow. By morning, I felt nothing at all, just numbness. After a quick stop in the bathroom to freshen up, I returned to the living room and began tackling the calls I needed to make. First on my list was contacting the courier service to schedule the pickup of some critical documents. With that squared away, I dialed the Peterson household to bring Miley up to speed on the events that had unfolded. She was hurt that I hadn't confided in her sooner, but I think she understood my reasons. Though she hadn't yet heard from Aurora, she expected a call or perhaps even a visit from her later that day. Next, I reached out to my parents, asking if they could take Christopher to Disney World for a few days. They were delighted to oblige and mentioned that Robert and Miley planned to join them after a couple of days. This arrangement would buy Aurora some time to explain herself to her own parents. But how does someone justify a year of betrayal without sounding completely unhinged? My following call was to Walter to let him know the documents were en route. I also asked him to draft custody papers for the Wilsons to sign, given my new status as a single parent stationed overseas. It was clear that I would no longer qualify for base housing, so plans had to be made to clean out the house and store my belongings. Leaving the house vacant wasn't an option, and I knew it would soon be reassigned to another family. I could only hope their experience there would be better than mine. While going through Aurora's laptop, I discovered several incriminating photos attached to emails. I transferred these to a flash drive to give to Walter when the courier arrived. Aside from these, most of the files were work-related. I called Susie to inform her that Aurora's laptop was ready for pickup and assured her that I'd already extracted everything I needed. When I asked if she was aware of Aurora's actions, she claimed ignorance, but generously offered Aurora a temporary place to stay until she could find something more permanent. I then contacted Bonnie Mendoza to ask if she knew anyone who could oversee the business in my absence. She and Michelle Rossi volunteered without hesitation. I let her know all the necessary files were on my desktop for her to access. Bonnie expressed her deep regret about the situation. "Michael, I had no idea until Dawn mentioned it last week," she admitted. "I always thought you two were rock solid. Sometimes you just don't see the cracks until everything falls apart. If you need anything, Dawn and I are here for you." "Thanks, Bonnie. That means a lot to me," I replied sincerely. The emotional weight of the situation was immense. Aurora's lack of protest made things painfully clear. At first, she confessed to only one instance of infidelity, but when Andrew caught her in the act, the full scope of her betrayal became undeniable. The man she had been with tried to comfort her until he realized he wasn't her only partner. Then, he left in disgust. "And what about Christopher?" Bonnie asked if there was someone who could care for him. "Yes," I explained. "His grandparents will take care of him temporarily while I'm overseas. After that, I'm not sure, but Aurora won't be part of his life." I planned to tell Christopher that his mom needed to go away for a while. Someday, when he was older, I'd tell him the full story. Bonnie invited me over for dinner, suggesting I bring my desktop and business paperwork so she could help me organize. "You shouldn't stay in that house any longer than necessary," she advised. "Too many memories, both good and bad. Come stay with us tonight." "Thanks, Bonnie. I'll come by," I agreed. I also told her and Michelle they could take any food they wanted from the house before I cleared it out. Their support, along with Andrew's, had been a lifeline, and I couldn't thank them enough. Later that evening, Bonnie and I spoke again. "Michael, that's what friends are for," she said. "You'd do the same for us." She asked me to bring some beer, mentioning that Andrew had been drinking heavily after witnessing Aurora's infidelity firsthand. "He was crushed, but knew you needed to know. I made him call you the next day." "I understand," I replied. "I'll share more tonight, and tell Andrew I appreciate what he did." Nigel Buford, my closest friend and confidant, had also been a pillar of strength during this ordeal. His unwavering support felt like that of a brother, and I wasn't sure how I would have managed without him. In the end, I survived the heartbreak and betrayal. Christopher stayed with his grandparents for a year while I worked overseas. By the time I returned, I had a new partner, Lillian. She had embraced the idea of being with a serviceman, and Christopher adored her. At 4 years old, he was thriving in a pre-K program thanks to Miley's dedication. He could already read, write, and count to 100. My friends and family, Robert, Miley, my parents, Andrew, Bonnie, Nigel, and Lillian, were instrumental in helping me rebuild my life. Walter's expertise ensured all the legalities were handled without issue. Aurora, meanwhile, had relocated to Orlando to be near her parents. Her arrival was met with harsh words from her mother, but reports suggested things were gradually improving. Therapy was part of her divorce agreement, and as far as I knew, she wasn't dating anyone. Life had moved forward. Though the scars of the past remained, I was profoundly grateful for the unwavering support of those who had stood by me. Together, they helped me piece my life back together, one step at a time. Her mother says she's finally made peace with the decisions she's taken and the ways they've shaped her life. With that clarity, she's chosen to step back from relationships for now, giving herself the space to reflect and heal. As for me, I'm slowly mending my own heart, and Lillian has been a cornerstone of that journey. We're engaged now and looking forward to getting married once she's released. Christopher is another source of comfort in my life. He often climbs onto my lap while I'm relaxing in the recliner, wraps his little arms tightly around me, and softly says, "It'll get better, Daddy." And deep down, I believe him. Like I said before, he's incredibly perceptive for someone only 4 years old. Work keeps me occupied too. My role as an avionics technician on the launch team is demanding, and I'm on track for a promotion later this fall. There's talk of some of us being transferred to another base further west. Barksdale, Tinker, and Davis-Monthan are some of the possibilities circulating in the rumor mill. Wherever I end up, though, the location doesn't matter as long as I have my family by my side. Nigel has returned to McGuire, and Amy is halfway through her deployment, with about 6 months left. Still, there's a possibility she might come home sooner than planned, but that's just speculation for now. She intends to leave the military when her current contract concludes next year. They're also engaged, and interestingly enough, both couples chose the same night to pop the question. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the Force be with you.